Hello, I am Ryan Di Corpo, co-coordinator of Pax Christi, New York State, and a member of the 50th Anniversary Planning Committee. I am joined by Father Bryan Massingale, the 2021 recipient of Pax Christi's Teacher of Peace Award, the James and Nancy Buckman Professor of Theological and Social Ethics at Fordham University. Father Bryan is the recipient of several honorary doctorates and a former president of the Catholic Theological Society of America. A pioneering scholar investigating the intersections between the Catholic Church, racial diversity, and the LGBTQ community, he has served as a consultant to numerous organizations, including the National Black Catholic Congress, Catholic Relief Services, and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. He is the author of Racial Justice and the Catholic Church, published by Orbis Books in 2010. Father Bryan, thank you for joining me this morning.
Good to be with you, Ryan.
So this is a series where we are interviewing teachers of peace and asking how they first got involved with Pax Christi. So how did you come to Pax Christi? What was the journey like for you?
Well, I knew of Pax Christi, of course, being a Catholic and being a Catholic social ethicist, so I knew of Pax Christi's work. I first became formally affiliated with Pax Christi back in 2003 when I was invited to address the annual meeting then, the annual convention. That was during the run-up to the Iraq War, and I gave an analysis of the national security strategy of the United States in light of Catholic peacemaking and peacekeeping. And that really began my association with Pax Christi with that first conference that I attended back in 2003. And since then, I've had the privilege and the honor of addressing the organization at numerous points, other points, back in 2010. And then in 2013, for the 40th convention, I was pleased to give the closing plenary address. And then last year, when they honored me with the Teacher of Peace Award. So it's really been about almost 20 years that I'm thinking about it. 2003, almost 20 years of association with Pax Christi.
I'm wondering, in the 20 years that you've been associated with Pax Christi, what have been the specific joys, but also the challenges of working for peace?
I would say that the joy of it is the being aware that you're continuing one of the prophetic promises of Christ, and that is his farewell gift and promise of peace. Peace be with you. I bring you peace. And I really do think that doing that work, continuing the mission of Christ, I think that being a member of Pax Christi and being a part of Pax Christi's journey enables me to live out that core principle of discipleship. So that's one of the joys. The other joy being with this organization is seeing its evolution in terms of really being a multicultural, anti-racist, and pro-LGBTQ inclusive organization. I gave that challenge to Pax Christi at their 40th convention, saying that they're going to have a future. They had to become more intentionally multicultural, anti-racist, and LGBTQ inclusive. And I think Pax Christi is a model of a Catholic organization that has risen to those challenges. They're not doing it perfectly, of course, no one does, but they really have made that they made real strong efforts in those directions. And so that's been a joy. A challenge, and this is something I try to say this delicately because I know that many in Pax Christi are deeply committed pacifists. And yet there are those who are committed to peace, like myself, who would not identify with pacifism unequivocally. I guess I would call myself and I know this is going to sound terrible at a Pax Christi convention, a just war pacifist. And I know that many Pax Christi have an allergy to just war thinking. But I say that because I know just war can be and has been abused. And yet serious thinkers really ponder, how do we live this prophetic vision of peace in a broken, imperfect world? How do we witness prophetically to a world without war, and yet also deal with the real life tragic situations in which we find ourselves? I don't have an answer to that, but I think one of the growing edges is to have a more serious, searching dialogue I'm sorry, I live in New York City, and so there's sirens going by, but they're not police sirens. I live in a corner of a hospital, so these are life-saving sirens.
Mount Sinai?
Mount Sinai, exactly. You know New York.
Yep.
I want there to be, I wish that one of the growing edges and one of the challenges is for there to be a very serious searching conversation between serious just war advocates. That means not just those who are ideologues who are using just war as an excuse to go to war, and between committed peace activists. Because even as I look at some of the rhetoric around the Ukraine war, there are those who are committed to peace saying, we're committed to peace, but we don't want to make judgments about those who are in difficult situations, but hidden in that is an almost but. And I just think that we really need to have a really serious searching dialogue. And so I know that this is, people are probably going to revoke my Teacher of Peace Award now by hearing this, but I just really think that that's a growing edge and a difficult conversation that we need to engage in with deeper intentionality.
I think there's some historical precedent for what you're saying as well. I mean, Albert Einstein, who's, constantly looked up to for the peace work he did, was not an unequivocal pacifist, but did engage in a number of anti-war causes in his lifetime. So I think that that's a struggle that has continued.
Well, I think there has to be. I mean, I wish, because I don't have a label for myself. I think that's the frustrating thing. I want to say that I know I am anti-war. I see war as a defeat for humanity, and yet, I mean, Augustine and Aquinas, we don't have to go back to them and do everything they said because they had some difficulties in their thought, but these were serious thinkers who wrestled with this profound dilemma. How do we be consistently anti-war and yet live in a broken world where humanity, unfortunately, has not yet evolved to the point of being able to live nonviolently? And so I want to be a part of Pax Christi's growth and evolution as we wrestle with how we put onto the currents of human evolution a growth in humanity so that we can finally move beyond war while realizing that humanity isn't there yet. And that's where I feel caught, but that's where I also feel that I would hope that Pax Christi would have room for folks like me who want to be embracing its profound anti-war stance, but also have this deep inner struggle of conscience.
You spoke previously about how 10 years ago you gave the charge to Pax Christi USA to be inclusive of different racial identities and the LGBTQ community. And I'm wondering how you see the Catholic peace movement evolving in the future. What are your hopes for the future of Catholic peace work?
One, I think that we need to continue to evolve in those directions because, as I said last year in my acceptance remarks, that the challenge of white Christian nationalism is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And white Christian nationalism is a profound intersectional threat to peace abroad and peace at home. That when we look at nationalist movements around the world and in this country, what they have in common is that not only are they against peace and use violence for their ends, but they are also not only militaristic, but they are also racist, they're also anti-Semitic, they're also misogynistic, they're also homophobic, they're also transphobic, and they're profoundly anti-ecological. And so I think that Pax Christi and the peace movement needs to be unambiguous about naming white nationalism, white Christian nationalism, as the most profound and dangerous intersectional threat to peace that we have. The other way in which I think I would like to see our organization, or I think a major challenge for Catholic peacemaking, is the gun culture in the United States. Unfortunately, we live in a country where the gun has become a sacred totem. It's almost become this object that people turn to for their sense of security and safety. And we've made it into a sacred totem. In other words, we believe that this object is worthy of veneration and that it protects us in a way that nothing else can or should. And I think that it's one thing to issue statements that decry acts of violence and the gun violence that take place, and we all know them all too well, in Uvalde and Buffalo and so many other places, unfortunately, El Paso. The list can go on and on. But I think Catholic peacemaking needs to deeply interrogate gun culture as a form of idolatry, and to name it forthrightly, and to realize that, as with every false idol, it cannot save and it cannot give us the security that it promises. And so I think that going forward into the future, the Catholic peace movement needs to be vigilant about white Christian nationalism, which has links not only to what happens here in our threat to democracy here in the United States, but nationalisms across the world, where we look at Poland, where we look at France, when we look at the Philippines. Nationalism needs to be forthright or in the forefront of our attention, but we also need to look at our gun culture in the United States and name it for being the idolatrous and blasphemous force that it is.
As Pax Christi prepares to mark its 50th anniversary, do you have any message for the attendees of the conference?
I have two messages. One is of profound thanks and gratitude. The members of Pax Christi as an organization has been part of the prophetic edge of the Catholic Church. Isaac, last year when I received the Teacher of Peace Award, said I was part of the prophetic wing of the Catholic Church. And I said, well, only Pax Christi could recognize that. It takes one to know one. So first, profound gratitude to you for your prophetic witness. And the second is a word of encouragement, a word of hope. Doing this work, building a culture of peace, is not easy, and we often do not see the results of our actions. And so I want to end with a note of encouragement to hang in there and not give up. And I want to make that concrete by referring to my favorite parable, the parable of the sower and the seed. Most of the seed that the sower sowed didn't bear fruit. Most of it fell on rocky soil and thorns and on roadways and is scorched by the sun. Most of what the sower sowed, most of the seeds did not bear fruit. But those that did bore an abundant harvest. And so I would encourage Pax Christi to continue to be the sowers of the seeds of peace, and to trust that the few seeds that do take root will bear a harvest that we can't imagine.
And just as a reminder, the 50th anniversary conference will take place from August 5th through the 7th in Washington, D.C. Father Bryan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Ryan. It's good to be with you.